most devastating mistake you can make in any social or professional hierarchy is to make your presence a cheap, unlimited commodity. The masses are conditioned to believe that staying visible, responding immediately, and being constantly available is the path to securing respect and connection. This is a profound psychological delusion. In the harsh reality of human social dynamics, undivided availability does not breed appreciation. It breeds complete contempt. The moment you make yourself perpetually accessible, you write the manual for your own devaluation. You signal to the social group that your time is worth nothing, that your attention has zero barrier to entry, and that your validation is guaranteed. When you are always there, your presence is taken for granted, much like the very air people breathe. Vital, but entirely ignored until it is gone. To claim your position as a high-value operator, you must understand the clinical reality of calculated absence. This is the foundation of Robert Greene's doctrine of strategic withdrawal. By removing your presence, you immediately create a cold psychological void that others are forced to navigate. In your absence, their minds will automatically begin to construct elaborate narratives about your worth, your activities, and your status. They will wonder why you do not chase their validation, and that state of wondering is where your influence truly begins to ferment. Human beings do not value what is abundant. They are obsessed with what is elusive. If you do not learn to withdraw strategically, you are mathematically guaranteeing your own social insignificance. The scarcity rule of personal presence. The hidden mechanism that governs this dynamic is Robert Cialdini's absolute law of scarcity. This principle dictates that opportunities, resources, and even human interactions seem infinitely more valuable when their availability is strictly restricted. The human ego is fundamentally wired to despise losing access to anything it believes it can freely consume. When you make your attention scarce, you trigger an automatic behavioral response that forces others to compete for your validation. If you look closely at the luxury markets, diamonds are not prized for their utility. They are treasured because their supply is artificially choked. In the same way, the elite do not make themselves accessible to everyone. They maintain an impenetrable barrier around their time, creating an aura of high status that commands instant deference. When you refuse to react to every superficial demand, you are applying the scarcity rule directly to your social presence. Most people operate on autopilot, rushing to answer every message, joining every social circle, and constantly explaining their actions. They think they are building rapport, but they are actually bleeding their social power. The true power players understand that a structured withdrawal of attention is a devastating weapon of influence. By making your presence a scarce resource, you force others to calculate the cost of losing you. They will begin to tread carefully around your boundaries, realizing that your attention is a premium currency that must be actively earned, not a free gift to be mindlessly consumed. The agony of the blocked choice. To understand why strategic absence is so psychologically painful for others, we must examine the behavioral law of psychological reactance. Developed by behavioral researchers, this theory demonstrates that whenever an individual's freedom of choice or access to a resource is restricted or threatened, the need to retain our freedoms makes us desire them significantly more than before. The human ego simply cannot tolerate the discomfort of being shut out. When you withdraw your attention, you are raising an unyielding plexiglass barrier in front of your reality. You are restricting their access to your validation, which violently triggers their desire to climb that barrier and regain your approval. This psychological phenomenon was brilliantly demonstrated in a classic behavioral study on toddler behavior. Researchers placed young boys in a room with two equally appealing toys. One toy stood next to a transparent plexiglass barrier that was only 1 foot tall, presenting no real obstacle, as the boys could easily reach over the top. Under these conditions, the boys showed no preference, playing with both toys equally. However, when the researchers raised the plexiglass barrier to 2 feet tall, physically blocking access to the toy behind it, the toddler's behavior changed radically. They ignored the easily accessible toy and went directly to the obstructed one, attempting to contact it 3 times faster. The barrier itself had transformed an ordinary object into an item of absolute obsession. When you deploy strategic absence against those who take you for granted, you are raising that 2-foot plexiglass barrier. You instantly turn your attention into their primary obsession. The paranoia of restricting access. This intense psychological reaction does not disappear as we enter adulthood. Instead, it becomes far more sophisticated, manipulative, and dangerous. The adult mind is wired to search for closure and understand cause and effect. When you treat someone with cold indifference and strategic absence, their ego interprets your silence as a direct threat to their personal autonomy and social status. They become desperate to breach your wall, not because they genuinely value you, but because their self-image demands your validation to remain intact. This explains why withdrawing your presence does not make a manipulator walk away. Instead, it fuels a consuming obsession to reclaim your attention. This phenomenon is famously illustrated in social dynamics as the Romeo and Juliet effect. In a landmark study of couples in Colorado, researchers discovered that parental interference and social barriers placed between young lovers did not cool their passion. Instead, it fueled their devotion to a white heat. As the external interference and restrictions intensified, so did their reported feelings of love and desire for marriage. When the social barriers were weakened, their feelings actually cooled. The barrier itself was the fuel. When you withdraw your presence from a toxic individual, your absence is the ultimate barrier. They will send messages, manufacture artificial emergencies, and recruit others to gather intelligence on your silence. They do this because their ego is starving in the void you have created. If you give them even a tiny, polite response, you are lowering the barrier and rewarding their manipulative behavior. But if you maintain absolute, unyielding ice, they are left screaming into a void that does not care. The feeding frenzy of social demand. To execute this strategy with clinical precision, you must master the principle of social demand. Psychological research has shown that scarcity becomes exponentially more powerful when it is driven by active competition. This was demonstrated in a famous consumer experiment involving chocolate chip cookies. Raters were asked to evaluate cookies from a jar. For half of the participants, the jar contained 10 cookies, while for the other half, it contained only 2. As expected, the scarce cookies were rated as far more desirable to eat in the future, more attractive as a consumer item, and more costly than the identical cookies in abundant supply. However, the researchers introduced a crucial variation. For some participants, the jar of 10 cookies was suddenly replaced with a jar of 2 cookies. This drop from abundance to scarcity produced a much more powerful reaction than constant scarcity. Most importantly, the researchers split this newly scarce group into 2 conditions. In the first, the cookies were reduced because of a mistake by the researcher. In the second, they were reduced because some of the cookies had to be given away to other participants to meet the high demand for them in the study. The results were staggering. The participants who believed their cookies were scarce due to social demand liked them significantly more and rated them as the most desirable items in the entire study. The feeling of being in active competition for a limited resource completely bypassed their rational judgment. This behavioral mechanism explains the success of elite operators who deliberately engineer competition. Think of the commercial fishermen who throw loose bait, known as chum, to large schools of fish. Soon, the water becomes a roiling expanse of thrashing fins and snapping mouths competing for the food. At this point, the fishermen save time and money by dropping bare metal hooks because the crazed fish will bite ferociously at anything. When you withdraw your presence and let others know that your time is being occupied by higher pursuits, you trigger this exact competitive frenzy. This was the secret strategy used by a highly successful car salesman who would schedule all prospective buyers at the exact same time, say, 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. When the buyers arrived and saw their rivals pacing around the vehicle, their leisurely assessment turned into a panicked, feverish rush to purchase. They did not just want the car, they desperately wanted to win the contest. The exclusivity of the scarce message. The power of scarcity is not limited to material commodities. It applies with equal force to messages, communications, and knowledge. According to Timothy Brock, and Howard Fromkin's commodity theory of persuasion, we find a piece of information significantly more persuasive if we believe we cannot obtain it elsewhere. This was demonstrated in an experiment conducted within a wholesale beef importing company. Customers were called and asked to place orders in one of three ways. One group heard a standard sales presentation. A second group heard the standard presentation plus information that the supply of imported beef was likely to be scarce in the coming months. A third group received the standard presentation, the scarcity warning, and a crucial piece of exclusive news. They were told that this scarcity information had come from exclusive, private contacts that the company possessed. The results of this study were extraordinary. Compared to the first group, those who were told about the scarcity of beef bought more than twice as much. But the real explosion in sales occurred among the customers who believed the scarcity news itself was exclusive and restricted. They purchased 6 times the amount of the standard group. The fact that the news carrying the scarcity warning was itself scarce made it overwhelmingly persuasive. When you withdraw your presence, you must also withdraw the information surrounding your life. Let your plans, your ambitions, and your next moves remain exclusive secrets. The moment you expose your daily schedule to the public, you destroy the commodity value of your existence. But when you remain silent and selectively share your plans only with those who have proven their absolute loyalty, your words carry the weight of a classified document. You trigger an intense curiosity gap that forces others to obsess over what you are doing behind closed doors. When you introduce absolute tactical absence against the backdrop of their constant noise, your sudden strategic withdrawal is magnified 100 times over. It acts as a black hole that absorbs their chaotic energy without letting a single drop escape. Against your ice-cold apathy, their theatrical attempts to gain your attention are exposed as pathetic, uncontrolled cries for validation. The contrast principle ensures that they do not see your absence as weakness. They see it as the ultimate manifestation of supreme control. You establish yourself as the absolute authority, while they are left standing there looking foolish, talking to an unyielding stone wall and completely draining their own social status. We have reached the critical point of this classified briefing. Analyze your own circle right now. Think of the last time you made yourself completely available, only to be treated as a second choice. Think of the power you handed over with every immediate response and every defensive explanation. When was the exact moment you realized your absence was a far more devastating weapon than your constant presence? Answer this in the comments below. If this cold truth hit you exactly where it was needed, and you are finally ready to stop bleeding your power, drop the words, "I am untouchable," in the comments right now to prove you are claiming your Iron Crown today. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to master the dark warfare tactics the elite use to dominate every hierarchy. Stay cold, stay scarce, and never explain your power.